Hi y'all, this is Tara Pohlmeyer with Progress Texas.
And I'm Ed Espinoza with Progress Texas.
And we're here at TribFest in Austin.
TribFest is a gathering of political writers, political minds, elected officials, and people who work or are just interested in the industry and come together to talk about how it's affecting Texas and the nation.
Absolutely, and this is all put on by the Texas Tribune, which a lot of us use for some of our political news here in Texas. They cover the Texas Capitol, they cover what's happening in Washington, D.C., and a lot of the conversation here today has been, will the Texas House flip in 2020?
So that's my first question for you. You went to a panel this morning called Will the Texas House Flip? And what were your takeaways? What were the big things they talked about this morning?
Absolutely. I was really excited to hear from Manny Garcia, the Executive Director of Texas Democrats, as well as Royce Brooks, the Executive Director of Annie's List here in Texas. And really some of the biggest takeaways for me and for Progress Texas were, yes, the Texas House is going to flip in 2020, and we will see a blue Texas come to fruition. And it really reaffirmed a lot of the work that you've put in, Ed, and a lot of the work that Progress Texas as a whole has been working on for the last 9 years about flipping Texas. And so there's a lot of excitement coming in as we go toward the 2019 election and the 2020 election.
So let me ask you this, because we've heard that Texas is changing for a long time. What's different about this moment right now?
Absolutely, and some of our research shows and our data shows that Republicans have been stagnant in Texas since about 2004.
The election, the electorate really hasn't grown that much since 2004.
Absolutely.
And they haven't expanded their majorities in the legislature or in Congress since 2014. This is the fastest growing state in America. Shouldn't there be some growth on that end? But there's not.
Absolutely. And so I think what we're seeing as we go towards 2020 is that kind of culmination of all of that work from the last 10, 15 years that we've seen across Texas from all of our different progressives and from all of our Democrats kind of coming to fruition in 2020. And so we will see, because of that, our electorate grow and finally surpass Republicans, and we'll be able to elect a lot more change makers and progressives to the Texas House in particular.
So let's talk a little bit about that growth, because as we're talking about Texas changing and as we're talking about Texas flipping, who are the voters that are driving this growth, and how are they voting?
Absolutely. We talk about two sleeping giants here at Progress Texas, and a lot of people talk about the Latino vote here in Texas and how instrumental that voter population is to Democrats and to progressives as a whole. But the second sleeping giant here in Texas is really new voters. And we've seen a lot of people move to Texas, a lot of people come out to vote for the first time ever, and our data shows that those folks are more likely to vote Democrat at a ratio of 5 to 1. And so when you look at the amount of growth, the amount of people that are getting out to vote for the first time ever, their values really are progressive values. And you've worked a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, that's right. And so when we talk about new voters, they're not just people who have just turned 18 years old. They're people who are also new Texans. So they've moved here from other places. We hear a lot about people moving to Texas from California, but they're also coming in from places like Florida, New York, Illinois, basically the places that you would expect intercontinental migration to come from, which is the biggest states. And those voters sometimes are in the ages of 40 to 45. They're in their 30s, they've got families, and they live disproportionately in the suburbs.
Absolutely.
So we saw a lot of that happen in 2018 with Beto and some of the suburbs flipping for him.
And at this panel here at TribFest called Will the Texas House Flip, there was a conversation about why have Republicans, why are they losing among specifically suburban white women, and what is happening with these women? And I think finally those people need to be talked to, and the people that are going out to earn their vote are Democrats. They're the people that are knocking on doors the most, the people that are out there talking to voters and listening to voters the most. And because of that, we're going to see Democrats win those voters as well.
So that takes me to my next question for you, which is, these elections are so much about the candidates or about the parties, but what it really is moving towards is it's going to where it should be, which is about the voters. Absolutely. And how is that making a change in Texas with regards to the issues that people are talking about and the things that voters are responding to amongst candidates?
Absolutely, and we see a lot at Progress Texas, and I think across Texas as a whole, that progressive issues that people care about are really mainstream issues. And so these voters want affordable health care access. These voters want gun reform so that our kids can go to school and be safe. These voters want quality education, and these voters want things that make really their quality of lives better. There's a truck going by, so I'll pause just a moment.
We're on Congress. It's going to happen.
But really, these people want things that impact their quality of life. And so when we talk about how to connect with voters, we really need to be listening to these voters and listening to what is going to make their lives better. And I think right now, Democrats' promise of kind of fulfilling all of these needs for us is really the most promising between the two parties.
And it's such an important thing that you touch on about progressive issues being mainstream issues, because we always hear this thing that, oh, well, maybe Texas Democrats are more moderate, or maybe they're more conservative, or Texas is like a blood red state, a ruby red state. You know, they use all these red terms. Yeah. But the truth is that Texas has had such low turnout for so long that they've really only had to cater to their partisan bases to turn people out. And there's been a larger Republican partisan base in years past than a Democratic one. That is changing. Not only is the Democratic base growing, but the general election electorate is growing. And so issues like you mentioned, healthcare, gun safety reform, climate change, a big issue in Texas, even in an energy state like ours, is a big issue. Public education is a big issue. A couple others that don't immediately come to mind, but like the polling shows that there is support for these progressive issues being mainstream issues in Texas. Okay, I only have one or two more questions for you.
All right.
What has happened when we look at the change? We talked about what's different now. We talked about the voters. What have we seen in not just 2018, but in the years leading up to that leads us to believe that this isn't a one-time thing, that this is actually a trend?
Absolutely. I think on the ground, people have been putting in the work. And so when it comes to, a lot of people say, well, the demographics are changing and that's helping Democrats. And yes, they are. But also, we've been putting in the work for quite some time. And so when we look at not only people coming in and voting, but when we look at how people have been impacted by this Republican-led state for so long, and how in a lot of times their voting rights have been taken away, and they've been really trying to sabotage and trying to slow down the vote here in Texas for quite some time, Republicans that is, when we see things like voter purges, when we see things like voter ID laws and other election-related things.
That's right.
It's really disheartening as a voter, and so when we look toward Democrats, we see them making voting more accessible, making elections free and fair, making sure that everyone is able to have a voice.
Yeah, voting should be easy, and it's something that is everyone's right, and it's something that Democrats have fought for time and again, because in a state like Texas, voting has had some barriers to entry. Now, some other things that I think have lend themselves to the evidence that this is going to be a better year in 2020 is that one thing that was overlooked, 2016 was actually a good year for Texas Democrats. Picked up 500,000 new votes, more than Barack Obama did. Those were not crossover votes, those were new voters. And then we saw that trend continue again in 2018. Democrats picked up 14 seats in the state legislature and in the state Senate in 2018. It also picked up 5 seats in 2016. That's a gain of 19 seats in 2 election cycles in the legislature alone, as well as 2 pickups in Congress. Look at all the big cities in Texas, the metro areas where 70% of the state's population lives. El Paso, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth. Those are places where the fastest growth is happening, and they're becoming dark blue areas. Not just blue areas, dark blue areas. So a lot happening in the state. We're going to see a lot more at the Texas Tribune Festival this week. We're going to be giving you some updates. You want one more thing to add?
Absolutely, yes. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from this morning was really the role of women in flipping the Texas House. And so I wanted to make sure I talked about that, because I think it's so exciting that not only is this change coming from Democrats, but that it's coming from Democratic women. And I think one of the things that Royce Brooks brought up was that with this whole Dennis Bonnen scandal and Bonnengate or Bonghazi or whatever you want to call it.
Dennis Bonnen is the Speaker of the Texas Legislature, who has basically been selling out some of his Republican members in order to get better Republicans in or something. But either way, he got caught. and now he's in danger, and now we have a chance
to elect our first woman as Speaker of the Texas House, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
I think it would be fantastic. We have so many great candidates for it. I think of all the Democratic women who I look up to and really respect, and I'm excited to see who our next Speaker of the House will be.
And, I mean, we have a number of strong women running for president as well who could easily be the nominee. You've got Kamala Harris and, of course, Elizabeth Warren that are polling really well. So could be another great year for women in America, not just, in Texas, but in other places as well.
Absolutely.
So
I'm excited to learn more from TripFest. I'm excited to bring more to y'all, and let's get ready to flip Texas in 2020, right?
That's right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be bringing you more throughout the weekend.